What's up, Patreon family? This is your girl, Megan from the Hood Astro Queen. Today, I want to talk athletes, all right? I'm not a really big sports girl. Admittedly, I'm not. However, there is a correlation that exists between athletes and domestic violence. Specifically, not really just the black ones, but the black ones are definitely the ones who are put on the chopping block first for reasons that I'm pretty sure we all know. But nonetheless, I just always thought it was interesting whenever an athlete would make headlines for battery, domestic abuse, or whatever the case may be. Looking at their charts, you see a lot of similarities. And my theory is this. A lot of the placements that are responsible for making really good athletes, right, people who can be very accomplished athletically, actually have unintended consequences or some really devastating blowbacks. And it could really inconvenience these people and cause a lot of chaos and havoc in their personal lives. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So what I'm going to do is do just a little bit of astrological research theory here. So bear with me. I'm going to actually go over the charts of quite a few athletes who have been accused of whether it be domestic violence, battery, assault, and then we'll discuss some of the key placements that they have in common, how these things contribute to them being really good athletes, but also the factor in the roles that they play in their domestic violence situations. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First up, we're going to start with Mr. Richard Sherman. So Richard actually used to play for the Seattle Seahawks. I think that is. If I messed that up, just correct me in the comment section. Once again, I am not a sports girl. However, he made the news recently following an arrest for, I think it was suspected domestic battery. So, according to reports, Richard Sherman was intoxicated and threatened to kill himself during a confrontation with family members before his arrest early Wednesday in a Seattle suburb. So it is Seattle. According to a 911 caller who identified herself as the free agent cornerback's wife. Audio of the 911 call, believed to be made by Sherman's wife, Ashley Moss, was obtained by ABC News and ESPN early Thursday. The caller described Sherman as being drunk and belligerent and said he was threatening to kill himself. The caller, who identified herself at one point as Ashley Sherman, also said that Sherman was being aggressive, wrestled with her uncle, and sent text messages to people saying that he was going to kill himself. The caller can be heard attempting to prevent Sherman from leaving the residence, saying, "Richard, please stop." She also told the 911 dispatcher that Sherman drank 2 bottles of hard alcohol. At one point during the call, the caller also asked the dispatcher to tell police, "Please don't shoot," and said that Sherman told her he would fight the police if they arrived. So Richard Sherman was born March 30th, 1988 in Compton, California. Although we don't know his time of birth, we can safely deduce that he is an Aries sun. His sun is actually placed at the 10th degree. Now, herein lies one of the major, most prominent commonalities that I see in the charts of a lot of athletes and simultaneously a lot of athletes who have been accused of domestic violence and abuse. That Aries energy, okay? Aries is actually one of the most athletic signs of the zodiac, along with the other fire signs. So we're talking Sagittarius as well as Leo. But Aries especially is a sign that is known for its high level of physicality. These are people who often, whether it be recreationally or professionally, are involved in competitive sports. Aries is very competitive. These are people who need to run, jump, throw things. These are people who ultimately need physical activity in order to sustain themselves. Aries, which is ruled by the planet Mars, is built to do. It's built to take action. It's built to go. These are people who need these kind of outlets. right? And they can actually be very, very efficient and very successful when you put them in an environment that allows them to channel their aggression. Aries is all about force. Its ruling planet of Mars is often referred to as the warrior planet, which is also very primitive and instinctive in nature. We're talking very primal, right? The tendency to want to either defend or to take, to accomplish. These are basic, primitive human instincts, right? That when we talk about like taking it back to the caveman era, a lot of these people operate off of that same kind of wavelength. People with very prominent Aries energy operate based on these same kind of wavelengths. And when we talk about athletes, that can translate very well. However, in your personal life, this could actually be a big issue, because if not stimulated, and of course free will does play a certain factor, just depending on the person and how evolved they are, and just a host of other factors, even within the chart, it could point towards a person who could be needlessly aggressive, once again, volatile. Mars as well as Aries both symbolize conflict. So if they're not really able to address it in a healthy manner, if they're not really able to express and kind of get all of this pent up energy and aggression out in their professional life, or even the ones who are still playing in the NFL or whatever their respective sports are, sometimes that can kind of bleed over, in that mentality of conquer, exerting force, defending, those kind of tendencies tend to jump out, and these people could play those out in their domestic lives. So this could look like a person or a guy who is very abusive, a guy who is very violent, people who have very violent tendencies, which is another really big trait or a big manifestation of that dark side Aries energy. Dark side Aries, especially the males, the women too, but that's a different video, can be extremely violent, okay? It's all about that, once again, that primitive level of thinking. When you think about animals, right? It's very animalistic. When you do something that upsets me, I go into a rage, right? And although this translates very well in terms of defeating an enemy or defending your team or, defending your title against another team, that it does, like, interpersonal relationships don't work like that. And, you get the right person in the combination with the right circumstance, this is a person who will knock your ass the fuck out, okay? So I thought that was very interesting, him being an Aries sun. And then as Richard is concerned, some other like key nuances that I noticed about his chart spelled out more red flags. So considering the fact that his sun is squaring his Neptune, that could be very indicative of a man who is very insecure. And so a lot of times what that square does is it creates the need to overcompensate. With his Aries sun squaring Neptune, he could be very sensitive. These are men who could even be narcissistic in nature as well. And that's just not a good combination. Another thing that I noticed too, and another outcome of his sun squaring Neptune, is that it can create the tendency to trend towards addictive behavior. These are people who often struggle with drugs, with alcohol, and that's further exacerbated when you consider the fact that he is a Pisces North Node. He has his North Node at the 22nd degree conjoined to his Mercury in opposition to that Virgo moon. And that's just like, what the fuck? That's a person who could be an addict all day long. And I actually feel very, very sorry for his wife because with his moon possibly conjoined to his South Node, it could point to where she is his caretaker. His wife is his caretaker, where she is his handler, where he doesn't have he's not all there mentally, and whether it be pills, alcohol, as they stated in the reports, he drank 2 bottles of alcohol. This man could seriously have a problem. Not only just an addiction problem or a substance abuse problem, but even mental. He could have mental illness. And typically in life, you find that addictions and mental illnesses do run, parallel with one another, obviously. But this point is further driven home considering the fact that he does have his Chiron here at the 23rd degree of Gemini squaring his Mercury. That's a huge red flag. That could definitely impair him mentally. It can make him someone who is even susceptible to like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde complex. One minute he's one way, and when he's under the influence, he could be a violent drunk, clearly, or where his violent side could really emerge while under the influence. That could be another manifestation of his Aries sun squaring Neptune as well. It could just deal with where he's off. His Mercury is even opposing that moon, that Virgo moon. And lots of Virgo prominent individuals, especially Virgo moons, can have really big issues with substance abuse. And this is because these are people who are always in their heads. They are also prone to a host of different mental ailments, mental health disorders. And a lot of them need a soft place to fall. A lot of them turn towards alcohol or other substances to help calm the mind. But the issue is that when we talk about Virgo addicts and Virgos who get hooked on substances or abuse substances, they make some of the worst addicts. It doesn't translate well because their brains, which is when you think about Mercury ruling Virgo, they function basically like they're off their cognitive abilities. And once that's kind of impaired and interrupted, they can be like extremely dysfunctional, and you could really see the dysfunction in terms of their habits very like plainly. It's very visible. And so with his moon in opposition to Mercury, that's also just a very that's almost even bipolar in nature, or it could point towards some personality imbalance. The moon deals with our personality. So he has a lot of issues here. The man is sick. Something is wrong with him. And so this is a perfect example of that. Even in terms of, him being suicidal and whatever the case may be, he could have, really just spazzed out and had a dissociative episode. And so with that being said, I hope he gets the help that he needs. But we're going to move on to the next chart. Chart number 2, which you can see pictured here, actually belongs to Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was born February 24th, 1977 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which places his sun at the 6th degree of Pisces and his moon at the 22nd degree of Taurus, conjoined to his Jupiter. But the smoking gun in his chart actually lies within his North Node, as he is an Aries North Node. His North Node is actually at the 26th degree, as well as his Venus at the 18th degree, and even Chiron at the 28th degree. Now, the Aries energy, as I stated before, is very, very commonplace in the charts of lots of athletes, even when we talk about fighters, because Floyd Mayweather is, in fact, a boxer. So that would still kind of fall under that same category, right? It's athletic, and it's a sport that literally contingents upon your ability to beat the shit out of other people or defend yourself against other people. If that's not quintessential Martian warrior energy, I don't know what is. And he is, undoubtedly one of the best boxers of all time. And even with that being said, right, that Aries North Node naturally creates a person where in this lifetime they are supposed to be highly active and physical, and these are supposed to be fighters and people who are supposed to, do really well when it comes to defending themselves, learning to compete, and all of those things. But Venus in a man's chart often deals with women, the women in your life. Even with him being a Libra South Node, he naturally is going to have a lot of karmic debt and baggage tied to the opposite sex or women. So with his south node of Libra forming in opposition to his Venus at that 18th degree of Aries, it's naturally going to make him exert and exude a lot of those more aggressive qualities and project them onto the women that he's dealing with. A lot of his relationships with women are very primal. These are men who can be very, very sexual, men who can also be very, once again, conflict driven, aggressive, even abusive. And if I'm not mistaken, it was alleged that he was like guilty. I don't know if he was ever formally charged and convicted, but he was at least alleged to have been beating up some of his girlfriends in the past. And I mean, this is clear. It's clear as day. His Chiron deals with the wounds that we sustain and receive, and not just emotionally and psychologically, but even physical wounds and wounds that we can impart upon other people. So considering that his Chiron is at that 28th degree of Aries, that could be a person who takes a lot of hits. Aries also rules the head, takes a lot of hits to the head, to the face. But guess what? This man is also handing them beats out as well. And although this actually puts him in a really good position professionally to make him a very professional and accomplished boxer, I would not want to be with this man in real life. It also makes it even worse considering that his Venus is opposing Pluto. That's a very common abuse aspect when we talk about natal charts. So like that is definitely a guy who could be forceful with women, abusive towards women, be very controlling in their relationships towards women. That's a big no-no. Okay, Venus running parallel to Chiron like that could deal with where his relationships with women are very dysfunctional. It's also worth mentioning that number 18 tends to deal with a very mean, like it can make a very mean, hostile, aggressive person as well. Someone who could be very superficial in terms of what he looks for in women. A guy who could just really be like, he could probably run through a lot of different women, which I've heard that he keeps a harem of women around him, but that's a different video for a different day. Point is, once again, this is another example of how we see or observe that parallel between Aries, that Aries energy, the Martian energy, and one's ability to be very accomplished and do really well when it comes to competitive sports, but then also how that can translate to a person who just has a lot of hostility and aggressive energy and often ends up taking it out on the people in his personal life. Not a good idea. Chart number 3 belongs to Ray Rice. Ray Rice is actually another former football player who was infamously caught on camera cold cocking his wife in an elevator, to which I believe he ended up getting fined, or there were like a lot of bans. I don't know what happened exactly. Y'all drop down in the comment section, but I do remember it being a big deal, lots of controversy, and his wife ended up like basically taking a united front with him and was just like, oh, it's fine, we're fine. And it was just the weirdest thing ever. But point is, Ray Rice definitely has a chart that is very congruent to everything that I'm explaining here when we talk about the presence of that Martian energy in athletes, okay? He was born January 22nd, 1987, making him both an Aquarius sun and Scorpio moon. Now, one of the major smoking guns within his chart is that Aries North Node, once again, conjoined to Mars. This deals with, as I stated before, a person who is supposed to be an athlete or supposed to be somebody who is very highly physical, a person who is even defensive, or maybe they know how to fight and they have to learn how to protect themselves and defend themselves and all that jazz. But the blowbacks could be anger problems. They could have anger issues. As a matter of fact, his Mars is contraparallel to this Jupiter here at the 21st degree of Pisces, which can be representative of a person who has a very difficult time controlling their anger. These are people who can actually fly off the handle and could have uncontrollable tempers that can explode when you least expect it. Especially if he's off the drink, okay, with Jupiter and Pisces. If he's off the drink, I don't know if he was drunk that night that he punched his wife. I mean, he knocked her out cold and then just stepped over her body. And, he is an Aquarius, Sun and Mercury, and they can be very callous, very cold, very indifferent. So in sheer Aquarian style, he just stepped over the bitch and was like, yeah, what? I think he even drug her off of the elevator while she was stiff and unconscious. It was so crazy, but Mars and Contra parallel to this Jupiter and Pisces can deal with where, these are people who can even have outer body experiences. They get mad. Next thing you know, pop, 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 pop. I mean, it's crazy. The same thing can be said for his Mars squaring Neptune like that, in terms of just him being someone where, when he gets really angry, it can get very, very serious. And a person who, when inebriated, can actually be extremely or a lot more volatile. So this is something that he kind of even shares in common with Richard. He also has his moon conjoined to Pluto, which could be another indicator of abuse, especially towards women, domestic abuse and violence. Not a good thing. And then when his Venus conjoined to Saturn, he could be very cruel. These are people who can be sadistic. These are people who, especially when it comes to like how he engages women, he probably likes to keep a very tight rein. And I say on his women because he does have indicators of him being a habitual cheater, as well as something else, but I ain't even finna get into all of that, okay? That Venus in opposition to Chiron and Gemini, my boy probably has dated multiple women or been with multiple women, like many athletes. And if you even want to talk about the correlation between a lot of that Martian energy and even having a difficult time being monogamous, a lot of athletes, because of that buildup of that Martian energy, it creates a lot of testosterone flowing through the blood. So once again, these are things that, make a man feel like a man. And although it does really well in terms of helping you accomplish and achieve more on the field, on the court, in your personal life, a lot of that testosterone has to be released. And Mars, as well as Aries, both also deal with sex. So that's another major way that these people release a lot of that energy, whether it being very violent and just getting really confrontational or wanting to fuck. That's also very primitive when you think about it. When you think about animals in the wild, right? Nobody has to tell them how to defend themselves, right? They are equipped with that natural built-in fight or flight response, and they know how to hunch. And, not to give men excuses, but this has a lot to do with why men, especially athletes and men with very prominent Martian or Aries energy, a lot of times they operate on those same wavelengths. They can be highly sexual. When they aren't, fighting and defending, they are ready to fuck. Okay, so, a lot of these athletes are, fucking left, right, and center. And that it's just not conducive for like a traditional monogamous type of person. But that's neither here nor there. And then finally, the last chart I want to take a look at is Mr. Randy Moss. Randy Moss is also another former football player. He was in the NFL. I'm not sure what team he played for. Y'all feel free to fill me in on that. He was born February 13th, another cold Aquarius, 1977. And I don't know where he was born, like Rand WV. What does WV stand for, y'all? I didn't have time to look it up. I just entered it in my software and it came right on up. But anyway, as you can see here, like so, he is very on brand with what we're talking about, okay? His sun is at the 25th degree of Aquarius. He's a Sagittarius moon, give or take, because we don't know his exact time of birth. But we can safely deduce that his Venus is at the 10th degree of Aries, alongside his Chiron at the 27th degree of Aries. Once again, that Aries energy. Of course, Venus does deal with how we make our money as well. So you could even look at that, especially with it trining his Saturn in Leo. And mind you, once again, Leo is another highly athletic sign that deals with him being an athlete, right? A football player. But, it could also deal with a man who could be very, very rough with women. And taking it back to the Chiron and Aries thing, very similar to Floyd Mayweather, right? You're inflicting a lot of energy, a lot of wounds onto other people. You're taking a lot of wounds as well. Also, too, with Aries dealing with the head, I thought it was very interesting when we talk about people who play close contact sports specifically. So boxers, football players and such. How there's this thing called CTE, where basically the inside of your brain kind of erodes over time because you spend so much time getting your head cracked, right? That it can have real life psychological effects where it can deteriorate your brain. And this is another cause or just another thing, another layer that could be added to why there's so much hostility and violence in the lives of a lot of these athletes. A lot of times after they die, people cut their brains open and find out oh my God, this person had CTE, and that absolutely contributed to why they were so volatile. Well, Aries does deal with the brain. It deals with disorders of the brain. So Chiron is another one of those planets or asteroids, so to speak, that can point towards physical health issues. So with Randy Moss having Chiron sitting directly on top of that Aries North Node, his North Node is at the 27th degree, Chiron is at the 27th degree. I'm more than confident, I'm willing to put money on the fact that he could have CTE. And this is speculative, or some type of other brain disorder, but I'm pretty sure of it. The number 27 also reduces to the number 9. The number 9 is also ruled by Mars. I think the man got something wrong in the brain. He could literally have a disorder. These are people who can have seizures, epilepsy. And a few years ago, a woman accused Randy Moss of domestic violence. And although I think the charges were dropped, let's be very clear. Based off of this man's natal chart alone, I could definitively say he's capable of all of that. Whatever she said he did that shit. He also has that quintessential Venus in opposition to Pluto. Once again, another key telltale sign of abuse, especially within a man's chart. I don't like it. At best, this could be a womanizer. At worst, they can be full out abusive. You could look at that restraining order that she took out on him as being symbolized by Venus in opposition to Pluto, especially in Libra, right? And as the Libra South Node, more so at that, where they can get very much caught up in the legal system. Think about what happens after you are charged with domestic violence, right? A lot of these athletes have to go to court, whatever the case may be, whether they get charges filed on them and that whole nine. So that's also very indicative of his Aries North Node, that Libra South Node. But even having Pluto so close or even in the same sign as that Libra South Node, that could just make him very forceful and controlling and domineering in a lot of his relationships. It's a hot mess through and through. These are men who might even stalk your ass when we talk about that Venus in opposition to Pluto, especially in Libra. Libra is the sign of ambush as well. Pluto is one of those planets that can naturally make you very obsessive. And once again, it forceful. It could take that to the next level. It's just so much wrong with this here. It's so much wrong. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and conclude my video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I might make this a part 2 because there are a lot of athletes out here that fit this Martian fire energy profile, right? So we can unpack that at a later time if you want to. Y'all let me know in the comment section what you think about this. What do you think about some of these athletes? Can you see the parallels? And yeah, make sure you practice unconditional self-love so that you can love others. And until the next video, I holla.